All right, let's dive into something really interesting today. We're going to explore a new kind of power play, one that's unfolding right now, based on some fascinating concepts from scriptwriter ARA KARYAN. We're talking about how some of the biggest names in Silicon Valley are trying to rewrite the rules of politics itself. And they're not doing it with votes or campaigns, they're doing it with code.
So let me just start with this question. What if you could gain real, actual political power without an army, without a political party, without ever even running for office? What if all you needed was the power of the digital word? It sounds like something out of a movie, I know, but as we're about to see, it might be someone's very real game plan.
So here's how we're going to break this all down. First, we'll look at a central paradox, something that just doesn't seem to add up. Then we'll get into the philosophy and the tech that are fueling this whole thing. We'll look at the key players, figure out what their strategy really is, and then, at the end, we'll ask the big question, who's really in charge here? Okay, let's jump right in with our first section, the central paradox. This is really the mystery at the heart of this entire story. We're going to look at why some of the loudest champions for individual freedom are suddenly cozying up to figures who seem to represent, well, the exact opposite.
Here it is, the core contradiction. You've got these tech titans, right? People like Elon Musk, Peter Thiel, David Sachs. They are constantly talking about decentralization, about freedom, about getting power away from the center. And yet, you see them aligning with a figure like Donald Trump, who is pretty much the definition of centralized top-down authority. It just doesn't compute. Or does it?
And make no mistake, this isn't just some intellectual debate. The stakes are incredibly high. I mean, just imagine Elon Musk as a government efficiency czar, or David Sachs becoming the White House's go-to guy on AI and crypto, or picture Peter Thiel as the chief advisor to the vice president. These aren't just fantasy roles. These are very real positions that could be on the table.
So to solve this puzzle, to figure out what's really going on, we have to look at the philosophical blueprint they're all working from. And that brings us to the core ideology that really underpins this whole movement, libertarianism.
So, what is this thing, libertarianism? Well, to put it simply, it's a way of looking at the world where individual freedom is priority number one, the absolute top of the pyramid. It's not about the state, it's not about the collective good, it's about the individual. The best way to think about it is that every single person is the king of their own castle, and their liberty is sacred. And this right here really shows you the fundamental clash. Libertarianism is all about the individual. Modern liberalism, on the other hand, is focused on the group, the collective. One side says, my freedom is everything, so the government should be as small as possible. The other says, hey, let's use the government as a tool to solve our shared problems. I mean, you can see how these are just two totally different worldviews. You know, this ideological fight isn't anything new. This quote from way back in 1955 really nails why they even started using the word libertarian. See, back then, the word liberal was starting to mean more government control, more state intervention. So the folks who believed in maximum individual freedom basically said, you know what, we need our own word here. And the one they landed on was libertarian. Okay, so philosophy is great, but at the end of the day, it's just a bunch of ideas, right? How do you actually make it real? Well, this is where the story gets really interesting, because this is where philosophy meets technology. Let's talk about the engine that can make it all happen, Web 3. The term Web 3 was actually coined back in 2014 by one of Ethereum's co-founders. The big idea is an internet without the giant middlemen, without the central servers, a place where you and I can interact directly, peer-to-peer. You could almost call it the libertarian dream turned into code. It's this vision of returning the internet to the people. And here you can see exactly how those big libertarian ideas get translated into actual technologies. The principle of self-sovereignty, of being in charge of yourself, that becomes your personal crypto wallet. The dream of truly free markets, that becomes DeFi, or decentralized finance. And the desire for limited government, well, that finds its form in DAOs. Every single core belief has a piece of tech to match it. So what happens when you build on top of this technology? You get a whole new economic space. ARA KARYAN, whose concept we're exploring today, actually calls this the blockchain matrix. Think of it like a parallel universe with its own rules, its own economy based on digital tokens. And the most important part, it's a space that's incredibly hard for traditional governments to get their hands on. So we've got the philosophy and we've got the tech. But who is actually pushing this all forward? Let's turn to the key players now, the titans of Silicon Valley, and really dig into the contradictions that make them so fascinating. So let's take Elon Musk. On the one hand, he presents himself as maybe the world's biggest champion of absolute free speech. But then you look at his businesses, Tesla and SpaceX, and they rely heavily on massive government subsidies and contracts. It's a pretty glaring contradiction when you put it side by side, isn't it?
And then you've got Peter Thiel. He's a techno-libertarian, someone who argues that technology is what's going to save us from all the messiness of politics. And yet, he himself can show some pretty authoritarian tendencies and uses very aggressive, centralized tactics. So the really crucial point here is that you can't just slap a simple label on these guys. It is way more complicated than that.
And this right here is where the pieces of the puzzle really start to click into place. It seems like their main goal isn't necessarily to build some perfect libertarian paradise. No, it's something much more direct. It's about breaking the system we have right now.
So why Trump? What's the connection? Well, the answer seems to be that it's not about ideology. For these tech titans, a figure like Trump isn't a leader they admire or want to follow. He's a tool. He's the dynamite that's powerful enough to just blow up the entire status quo. The goal wasn't to plan what to build on the rubble, but simply to make sure the old building was completely level.
So this wasn't a marriage of shared values. It was an alliance of pure calculation. You could call it an anti-system alliance. It's much more accurate to see them not as a group of ideologues, but as strategic allies who came together to fight a single common enemy, the established order.
This image really shows the fundamental change we're talking about. Power is shifting from that old familiar pyramid structure, where decisions are made at the top and flow down, to something totally new, a decentralized network. In this new model, power isn't stuck in one place. It's distributed, flowing across the entire network.
So let's start to wrap this all up and look at the final question. If power is really moving away from traditional institutions and into these new decentralized networks, what does it even mean to be in charge anymore?
When you really boil it down, the formula seems pretty straightforward. You start with an ideology, in this case, libertarianism. You add a powerful technology to it, Web3, and what you get is a brand new path to power and influence, one that exists almost completely outside of the traditional political system. And all of this leaves us with one huge, incredibly important question to think about. In a world where real power and real value can be created with a few lines of code, who is ultimately going to be in charge? Is it going to be the governments we elect, or is it going to be the architects of our digital world? The answer to that question is being written right now, as we speak.